Good morning, everyone. Welcome back. Another day of live streaming portrait sketches. And I'm going to do something a little bit different today than I've done the last few days. And I'm going to show you my reference image right now. Let's take a look at it. This is the image that you will find. There's a link in the description below in this video description. So you can access this reference image off the internet on unsplash.com, download it and use it yourself. It's copyright free. And I've decided to use a grayscale or monochromatic image here today because I want to do a value study or monochromatic painting today instead of the full color type of painting that I've been doing. And again, it's value studies are so important, and I've done lots of videos about that, and you can look on my channel for those videos if you want to learn more about the importance of doing value studies and how I do them. I completely agree, and I learned this early on in my painting career that the value is more important than color, but yet we focus on color more. And so if you're a beginning painter, if you're struggling with your paintings to get them to look the way you want, your portraits, I really highly recommend that you do value studies. You learn about them, you do them regularly. In fact, I highly recommend value studies for everyone who's serious about their painting and not just for beginners, because they bring us back to the roots of understanding how to represent three-dimensional shapes in our paintings accurately through the use of value. It's really the shadows that create the shape, and the relative values in the painting are so important, and you have to be able to see them and reproduce them. So there you go. We've got this painting that's got a lovely range of values from the whitest white light areas you can imagine here in the forehead, cheek, chin, and lower neck, down to the blackest black that you can get here in the hair, the background, the eyelid, corner of the mouth, a few places like that. They're right in the ear. You can just see some it is beautiful gradual change from light to dark. And so that will, by trying to reproduce this will help us to work on that. I think I'm going to use indigo, Daniel Smith indigo as my color. And just use a single color. I might mix in some other colors as I go just to create a little bit of interest, but yeah, we'll see. I probably should just stay with one color to be a true monochromatic painting. So, and if so, that I think that's going to be indigo, which is a convenience neutral color. It's a little bit of a bluish gray, and a gorgeous color, my favorite. All right, so here we are. And we're going to get started. So grab that reference image and let's start painting. I have my the picture of the lady here transferred to the paper. I realize it's a little hard to see on the camera, and I tend to draw a little bit darker when I'm going to paint live stream like this, so that it can be visible to the camera. Otherwise it gets washed out. But so I've got that, and again, really just talking a bit about this. You know, I've tried to outline, for example, the line of the core shadow, they call it, where the light, where we transition from light to dark, and identifying that line. That's really important to do. And I did that on the nose and some other places. So again, I'm less concerned about just saying, you know, drawing the outline of the eye, for example, or drawing the outline of the nose or lips. I've really marked more where I see light and shadow being defined, and that because again, that's the most important thing. Okay. So I've got my indigo mixed up here on my palette, and got a nice big soupy mix of that. My big question here is whether to start with the background. I think I will in this case. I haven't been doing that in the last few paintings, but I think I'm going to go ahead and really outline the outline of the face, which is a very strong line all the way around, and then into the hair, and I'll kind of, yeah. And so it's always good to have a plan before you start. I think some people who are beginning painters don't realize to what extent artists, painters, watercolor painters have really planned out their painting before they even put a brush to the paper. And so thinking through what you're going to do, partly because you have to move very quickly with watercolor um, before things dry. So I'm going to work wet on dry here with a big soupy mix of my indigo. Oh, let me start my timer. I'm trying to keep track of how long I'm painting. So I've got a timer running. All right, here we go. I'm using the biggest brush that I can get away with, and because again, that's going to make it so that I can cover as much. I want it maybe the darkest in the corners, and then gradually and this big brush is proving a little bit challenging here. Maybe because this is a fairly small drawing, I think just trying to get all of this area wet there. Come into a slightly smaller brush so I can. Now these quill brushes do have a nice point on them. So even though they're fairly big, I'm being pretty particular here because obviously this edge of the woman's face is very important. It really represents, her profile here and the shape of her face. So I'm having to be pretty careful here. And all right, so got that, and then these, there we go. All right, now that I've got that, I can, areas where I want to maybe have a little darker edge there and a little bit of a blending. That point in the ear is very dark right there. And again, the area into her face here is dry still, so now I can extend the areas without it blending or blooming. And I see a little bit of an earring there. The back of the ear is quite dark, so I'm bringing that in. And this is quite dark along here, edge of her neck. There's a bit of wispy hair in here that I think I'm going to try and grab, and like that. And this neck area here is actually quite a gradual transition of color. So I got the brush wet and just blending that in, and leave that. And eyebrow, front of the eyebrow quite dark, but then it blends back towards her temple, and so drop a little darker in there where it was already wet. Okay. Now, this is quite dark, like I already did this here, but now, oops, and I see I got kind of a hard edge right there, right? So, and I don't want that because I want this to come along. The darkest point of this shadow kind of runs along here in her, on her chin line here. Is that what it's called? No, jaw line here, and then up and into her cheeks. So I'm going to lay down the darkest part there, and now grabbing my brush a little wet, I'm going to blend this out up into her temple, where that goes like that. It's actually a little lower than that, more like that. And yeah, and this will allow me, yeah, to, since I laid down some heavy there, I'm going to try and heavy pigment, I'm trying to blend that out now and get more of a natural gradual change and no hard lines, which is difficult to do, but we can do it. Yes, we can. And again, that line there is good, but there's a real dark line there. We want to keep that, and then it comes down into her neck. It's pretty dark back in here, however. And there's a few lines that come down like this. Then there's the edge of her like neck muscle, and then into the darker hair here, which we already did before, but now I'm going to come back and emphasize the darkness of that again. And this is still wet, so it's going to nicely blur out into the hair, which is what I want. And her, I got to maintain the top of her head here, because that's important. Where kind of where that goes back into the shade. And it kind of goes down that way, and again nicely, because this is still wet. It's one of the darkest, and the watercolor, of course, always dries much lighter than it will be. So this, as you can already see, these background areas that I did has really lightened quite a bit. And that's okay, because I think I want to really have her. I think I'm not gonna. I'm getting a little bit of a bloom here. I'm gonna hold off on that, and because I want to maintain. I need to create a nice kind of sharp edge where her head kind of ends up there. Anyways, okay. Where should I go next? It's still wet in here, so again, I'm going to kind of emphasize this jawline a bit, because that's the darkest part. It's dark all over in this jawline area, but I still want to emphasize the darkest point of that. So okay. Well, it's in most of this paper now, except for the hair, yeah, again, learning to judge the wetness of your paper is so important. And this is cool to the touch. It's not shiny. So that means it's kind of in the danger zone, in the sense that if I were to paint over in this background at all or up against it, or even in this part here, um, I would probably get blooms because it's still damp and it feels cool to the touch. It's definitely, there's moisture there, but it's not shiny. There's no, you can't really see that it's wet. And so but it's really, it would be dangerous to paint there because I'd get blooms. So now I need to wait or get out my hair dryer and then dry it so that I can come in and do some more. Unless there's areas that I see that there has kind of dried and I want to come back in, um, and paint. But like for example, trying to paint in here and we see I start to get that bloom, that look, and so it's kind of telling me to stop and let it dry and then continue on. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to get my hair dryer. I'm going to turn off the mic and use my hair dryer. All right, let's get back on this here. Um, so again, I'm using Daniel Smith. Indigo is the only color I'm using here. You see I've got that on my palette. And I'm coming with a little bit smaller brush now so I can start to attend to some of these areas of greater detail. I've got eyes. I've got at the top there very dark, and a little bit of dark at the top of the eye and back in this corner, very dark. And I'm going to reapply, I think, some to the eyebrow and into here. Then grab a wet brush and just drag some of that color out up in here. And down. And again, that area. Now, so even though we're only using one color, it's still a challenge to really see the values and reproduce those accurately to get the shapes that you want. So meaning that other techniques are still at play, like for example the contrast between hard and soft edges, which is very important, and still needing to do that is still a bit of a challenge. That's what I'm trying to do here. It's important up in here, I think. And something like that. And very dark in the ear. And that kind of connects to the hair behind the ear. That dark area connects in there. And around this earring. And to the front of the ear, very dark. And off into this area again. So I'm really just building up the tone, the value from what I was doing before. I'm kind of coming back to some areas. And of course, because it's transparent, what I did before and some of the edges and different effects I got will still show through after this dries, but it'll have a nice glazing layering effect, which is, I think, always lovely. And again, emphasizing this jawline. This is wet again. And I'm going to come down into here where there's a bit of emphasis on her, the muscles on her neck here and here. And I feel like I want to soften that again, especially on this front edge. And up into here again. Somewhat, is deceiving, right? How much lighter when I put this down, this indigo down initially, right? It looked, wow, that looked really dark, and then it dried, and it's like, wow, it's really a lot lighter than initially it looked. And so again, only through experience and lots of practice with this will you start to get a sense for how dark you can go. Most beginning artists tend to go too light most of the time, and with their values, they're painting the values of the colors they're putting down, and then everything looks washed out. And okay, trying to model a little bit there in the forehead, very light values in the forehead, but there's a little bit going on there I want to capture. Kind of there's a bit of some values coming off behind her eye here, and I want to blend that nicely into this area. This is still wet here where I laid down some earlier, so I can blend that. And I need a bit darker in here. And maybe into here a bit, just dragging this out, dragging some of this color in here. Don't want perfect lines everywhere either. Sometimes you want kind of a messy, I don't know what's the word to say, but yeah, just because watercolor lends itself to kind of the colors kind of, I don't know what it's doing, like right in here is really pretty, and I like where it's a more organic, it's more the flowing of the pigment in the water, and you can't control it, but that's really what is beautiful about watercolor. So you don't want to try to control everything. If you have control issues, they will be revealed in painting in watercolor. Watercolor will challenge your control issues and make you relinquish control. Okay. Sorry to have to say that, but it's true. Okay. Some details around the nose, the nostril here, these details, of course, eyes, nose, mouth, is really what makes the form of the face actually appear. So they are important. This is where you have to slow down. This is where you have to get it right in terms of the placement of the pigment and all, and decide where the hard edges are going to be, and then where this area here kind of blends up into the nose here, right? So this can soften as it goes up away towards the eye socket here. It's very light in here. It goes up towards the eyebrow and then towards the eye here, and all. And there's some darkness here in the back. It's actually quite light in the iris in the center of the eye, which is normally not the way it is, but just in this, because she's looking towards the light, looking up, that it just gives that a look. And yeah, down into here and here. And I think I'm going to drag some of this darkness into the area below her eye, because there does this little thing here. I want to say that the bags below her eyes. She doesn't really have bags below her eyes. Very pretty lady. But I'm just saying, there's a little bit of a shadowy area here. I don't know who this person is, by the way. This is an image off the internet, just a random person. I've said it before. I'll say it again. I think it's better if you're trying to do portraitures, just to do portraiture of people you don't know. Everyone wants to paint their grandchildren or their a family member or something, and it's like, and then they're really struggle, and it's because you know that person too well. You know exactly what they're supposed to look like, and and also it's very personal to you. It's just don't try to learn to do portraiture painting people you know and love. It's just too hard. Okay, just too hard. And so there is, again, everyone, yeah, so this, again, back, I'm just using pictures of random people I get off the internet. And you know what, there's tons of pictures to choose from, so just go get some. And I've already chosen the pictures for this month-long odyssey I'm on here of painting portraits. And I've kind of got them all lined up, and again, I'm just gonna, yeah. So again, I need to blend this into it's very light back here behind the nostril, so I don't want to blend that direction. I'm only blending up towards the nose, because that's where the shadow goes. And again, I'm just looking at that reference image and really trying to get a sense for which direction, yeah, the values go. Super important. Yeah. Alright, so now it doesn't need to be quite, it's a little, if you compare the value on her neck to the value of her face, it is darker. Her entire neck is darker, except for maybe at the very front there, right here, where it comes and hits the dark background. But even then, it's darker. And so I had kind of left the front part of the neck pretty white, or completely white, and now I'm realizing it's not right. It's too light. So now I'm gonna come in here now. I dropped in some water and did a little light wash, and now I'm gonna pull, yeah, and it is pretty white down on their chest there, but that's the only area that's, so anyways, trying to kind of adjust that just a little bit, trying to carefully look. And and again, I got some hard edges in there where I really maybe don't want them, but and may have to come back a little later and take care of that by. Oh, there's lots of ways you can solve problems. You can come back and scrub and lifting paint later. If you got like right here, I got kind of a hard edge, so I could get my brush and kind of see, can I kind of scrub that and kind of lift that hard? I am a little bit able to. So even though it dried and you got kind of a hard edge where you didn't want it, uh, especially when the paper's still not completely dry, you can come back in and lift and loosen that a little bit and get rid of that little hard edge. And again, that only works effectively if you have good watercolor paper, 100% cotton. If you try to do that scrubbing on cheap paper, it'll kind of basically makes the paper fall apart and change its kind of, it changes the constitution of the paper, so to speak, which is not good. And then you can really see what you did, which you don't want to see it. Usually you don't want to see where you were scrubbing. Okay, I'm going to do that. Something like that, I guess. Yeah, okay. What else do I need to do? Lifting a little in there, kind of creating a softer edge, and same here. Okay, I'm going to leave that. I'm going to come back up to the areas. Yeah, there's a need for a little more gradual, kind of the same problem here that I was just dealing with on the neck, where I kind of left. There's a pretty strong line here, and I would like that to be softer, so putting in some pigment and then really softening the edge towards the front of her cheekbone, and then if I can kind of scrub and soften that line that was already, that hard edge that was already there, possibly. I'm getting a little finicky here, I guess. Maybe I shouldn't be quite so finicky, but I'm constantly working towards the darker values, and see that some of the darkest value areas are here right above the ear, into that, and back in front of the ear here, and so I keep coming back to those, and the paper's a little wet there, so it's nice, blending out nicely, and like that. Okay, and back up to the eye where it's pretty dry now. And again, this is not dark enough by my reckoning, above the eye where basically her eyelashes, where she's looking up. So I'm going to come back in, and it's pretty dry, so I can just put down darker, not obliterating the areas, covering completely the areas I had done before. That lets some of those shine through still, and so then I get a nice variety of values in there. Like that'll work, I guess. And the front eyelash below the eye is pretty dark, and a little glint on a bit of at the top of the eye. Oh, and there's a little bit of another eyebrow over on the other side of her face that I didn't get before. I'm darking that there, and that'll create a nice sense to both sides of her face. And then her nostril, pretty dark inside the nostril, so that's good. And to the back, there's a nice little moon-shaped arc right there behind her nose, behind the nostril, I should say. But I want that to blend up into her nose again, or her nostril here. So wetting and drawing that up, and back down to the mouth again. And again, you can see I did this before, and it was pretty dark at the time I did it, but it dried. Quite a bit lighter than it was initially. That's okay, because now I can come back and add another layer, another glaze, so to speak, and just darken it even more. But some of the old colors kind of stay, the old, I should say, values, the old values, the previous application of values are still there and a little bit lighter. And there you go. All right. Now again, look at the ear. This is a good example, what I was talking about earlier. See how I left that shape there where the ear was, but if you look at that, that's super light, right? It shouldn't be that light. If you look at the reference, this should be much darker value. It's still lighter, relatively lighter than the dark black hair and all around it, but it should not be that light. And so because it's so light, it's sticking out like a sore thumb. That ear is just like screaming, look at me. Well, we don't want to look at the ear. The ear is not a very important element here. We want the, obviously the interest is in the front of the face. So I need to, again, I've got a little bit of indigo on the brush, and I'm looking at the reference to see how to create the shapes that I need to create. But I'm really overall darkening this. I mean, really, the only place that there's a real white glint is on that earring. Everything else is can be darkened, but still not completely darkened. Not going super dark, but relative to the front of the face, it should be a lot darker. So see what I did there, and that's important to see that and go, oh wow, that's you know that's too light, and it's screaming, look at me, and we don't want necessarily to look there. Values are, I was just reading about this in a book the other day. Values are relative, so it's how light and how dark it is compared to the value that it's, other values in the painting, or the shape that it's closest to. Like, and so you're constantly asking, is this area lighter or darker than this area? Is this, and you're constantly asking that question. And am I getting the relative values correct? And there. Okay. These quick little studies are just that. They're studies for you to practice your creating creating the correct values of modeling shape, of literally just drawing with paint. How do you draw a human figure? And that's so they're meant to be fairly quick studies, and opportunity to just practice, practice, practice. You have to get a lot of brush miles, is the way I've heard it said, and I think it's a good way of looking at it. Just a lot of repetition in your painting in order to get good. I realize I've gone over these areas lots of times, but I'm just building up the values, getting it. I really want, the areas of the darkest dark of the painting, I really want them to be dark. And this indigo is fairly transparent, and so it's and drying much lighter than I think it's going to every time I put it down, and so it just need to come back and add a bit more. But that gradual building up of value is actually kind of the safe way to go, because you're able to just build it up slow. Let it dry, come back, add a bit more. All right, it's 34 minutes since I started, so I'm getting close to being done here, and that's good. So thank you for being here. I know we don't have lots of live viewers when I'm doing this live, and that's fine. I'm not really doing a super interactive thing here, right? I'm not answering questions or anything. Sorry, I can't really do that and paint at the same time. Um, but a lot of people are watching these after I post them and all. So if you have questions or certain things you'd like to ask, please do so in the comments, and I will try to kind of create a little interaction here. And yeah, let's just, I'm going to pull this a little closer to the camera so we can see it there. Yeah, I think it's good. What would again, I like to critique my work a little bit. What do I see here going on? I think I need to darken in here. So I think just the way I've been darkening here, in some of these areas, if I look, the relative value is this dark area should be as dark as the back of the hair, right? And really even the background is that dark. But I don't think I want to darken the background a lot. I think I'll leave that the way it is. But I think I do want to darken this. So I may get a big brush, now this is completely dry, and a lot of pigment, and just darken this a lot more. And yeah, this whole area in here and back in here, leaving some of this lighter here where the front of the hair has got more light on it, but back in here I'm going to darken it. And otherwise, I think a lot of these other areas are pretty good. I don't want to go much darker in any of these other areas or else they get too dark. So yeah, so I'm gonna do that. So it might look a little different when I finally get it done, but that's my, other than that, I think it's looking pretty good. I'm gonna finish this one up. I appreciate you being here, taking part, and again, I'm doing a portrait every day, at least every weekday this month, the month of March. I might do a painting every day, literally 31 days this month. We'll see if I can pull that off. But it's my challenge to myself. It's Portrait March. It's the month of portraits in March, and I'm gonna try to paint every day, and I'll be posting them on social media and doing these live streams. So glad you could join me, and I'll see you next time. Have a great day.